Welcome to the Beckman Coulter Chemical Awareness 2 Toolbox Talk. This Toolbox Talk will explain what COSHH is, how it is managed, what your employer responsibilities are and what your responsibilities are. What is COSHH? COSH is the law that requires employers to control substances that are hazardous to health. You can prevent or reduce workers' exposure to hazardous substances by finding out what the health hazards are, deciding how to prevent harm to health, risk assessment, providing control measures to reduce harm to health, making sure they are used, keeping all control measures in good working order, providing information, instruction and training for employees and others, providing monitoring and health surveillance in appropriate cases, planning for emergencies. Most businesses use substances, or products that are mixtures of substances. Some processes create substances. These could cause harm to employees, contractors, and other people. Sometimes substances are easily recognized as harmful. Common substances such as paint, bleach, or dust from natural materials may also be harmful. What is a substance hazardous to health? COSH covers. COSH covers substances that are hazardous to health. Substances can take many forms and include chemicals, products containing chemicals, fumes, dusts, vapors, mists, nanotechnology, gases and asphyxiating gases and biological agents, germs. If the packaging has any of the hazard symbols, then it is classed as a hazardous substance. Hazard pictograms, symbols. Hazard pictograms alert us to the presence of a hazardous chemical. The pictograms help us to know that the chemicals we are using might cause harm to people or the environment. The GBCLP hazard pictograms appear in the shape of a diamond with a distinctive red border and white background. One or more pictograms might appear on the labeling of a single chemical. Ensure that you are aware of the chemicals' MSDSs, material safety data sheets, location in case of an accident with a chemical. In case of an accident, get the MSDS immediately and go through the do's and don'ts for the chemical S involved in the accident. If the emergency services are called, hand over the MSDS on their arrival and provide as much information regarding the accident as possible. Always follow the chemical safety training instructions. In case of a doubt, contact your supervisor manager for clarification and don't take risks. Safety data sheets. Safety data sheets, SDS, are required by the UK REACH regulation. SDS are important documents in the safe supply, handling, and use of chemicals. They help ensure that those who use chemicals in the workplace use them safely without risk of harm to users or the environment. The SDS will contain the information necessary to allow employers to do a risk assessment as required by the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health Regulations, COSHH. The SDS itself is not an assessment. However, it will describe the hazards, helping employers assess the probability of those hazards arising in the workplace. SDS are a must if a chemical is hazardous and is being supplied for use at work, whether in packages or not. SDS are also needed if your chemical is not classified as hazardous but contains small amounts of a hazardous substance. From the MSDS, Beckman will produce a COSHH assessment which takes into account how you use the chemical, i.e. you may dilute it. It will also advise what PPE is required, gloves, mask, etc. The assessment will also identify what you should do if you are contaminated by the chemical. COSH assessment, identifying hazard and assessing risk. You are probably already aware of many risks in your trade or industry. A COSH assessment concentrates on the hazards and risks from substances in your workplace. Remember that hazards and risks are not limited to substances labeled as hazardous. Before using any chemical, ensure that you have any necessary PPE and it is in good condition. Only use approved chemicals approved by Beckman. Never use chemicals supplied by the client. Always use the right dilution ratio. Always read the labels. Store the chemicals safely. Never ever mix chemicals. When working with any type of hazardous material, it is essential it is handled and stored safely at all times. COSHH, control of substances hazardous to health, is a legal requirement that means you must have procedures in place to reduce or prevent your workers' exposure to hazardous substances. Why store chemicals in a COSHH cabinet? Chemicals, if not kept safely, may pose a direct risk to your employees if there were an accident. Your workplace may use some of the chemicals detailed below, and you should carry out a risk assessment before deciding how many cabinets you need to use to provide the highest standard of safety. Chemicals of different types need to be segregated from others, and your risk assessment should identify these. The Health and Safety Executive has specific guidelines relating to the storage of flammable liquids, which covers many chemicals, but there are others that also need to be kept safely. Risk assessment. Carrying out a risk assessment will determine which substances must be stored in a COSHH cabinet and if these should be separated when stored. The Health and Safety Executive is mandated by law to ensure workplaces are as safe as possible, so using specialist cabinets for storage will help you meet its stringent requirements.